Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way into the creative industries. I'm Amelia Sciandra, and I'm here with my incredible co-host, Daniel Allen. How are you, Dan?
I'm sick, but I'm powering on. But no, I'm so excited about today.
He's mucus filled, but he's still here.
that's some imagery to start you off.
Absolutely. Well, you want to be here for this episode, I reckon, Dan, because we're talking to somebody.
Wouldn't miss it.
Super exciting, I would say.
Yeah. Oh my god, it's so exciting. I remember watching Drag Race at university.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was introduced to it by my girlfriend at the time. And it was just, I'd never seen anything like it, and it was just such a joyous show.
So joyous,
celebrating just so much about humanity. And yeah, I've loved it sort of ever since. So.
Absolutely. So that's right. We are talking to Fenton Bailey, who is the executive producer of RuPaul's Drag Race. He has just had a new book come out. It's called ScreenAge, How TV Shaped Our Reality from Tammy Faye to RuPaul's Drag Race. And it's available in all bookstores now. He's done so much over the course of a very illustrious career, bringing outsiders, quote unquote, onto television and into the mainstream. So without further ado, please welcome to the podcast our guest, Fenton Bailey. Thanks so much for being here, Fenton.
Well, seriously, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
We there's so much that we could talk to you about, obviously. Your CV could take up, I think, pages and pages and pages. But I'm wondering if maybe we start with perhaps what you might be most known for, especially to our listeners, which is RuPaul's Drag Race. But I don't know if that's a good place to start, because I don't know if that's the very beginning for you. So maybe you could just tell us about kind of the very beginning of your career and what led to World of Wonder and kind of how that began.
I mean, in a way, Drag Race is the beginning, the alpha and omega,
yes.
In the sense that Randy and I we met at film school, and there wasn't really an independent film business, so we didn't know how we were going to get into Hollywood to make movies. So we had the brilliant idea of starting a pop band. We were called the Fabulous Pop-Tarts, or that's what we called ourselves. And
that's a
we
great
were
name.
sort of like the Pet Shop Boys, I guess. And, I thought that having no musical ability, because I can't sing and I can't play an instrument and I can't dance, I thought these were all excellent qualifications.
Of course.
The era of the music video. But long story kind of short, we were on tour and in Atlanta, and this extraordinary creature introduced us on stage, and that was, of course, RuPaul. And Ru was so brilliant that it was a tough act to follow, his introduction. And we were like, from that moment on, we became friends. Ru asked us to manage him. We directed his supermodel video, got him his record contract, got his talk show. So we've worked together for a long, long time. And of course, out of that relationship and that trust and the sort of endless inspiration Ru provides came eventually Drag Race.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And so in terms of how you all kind of developed World of Wonder, which is your production company, can you talk a little bit about, you've got maybe an inception of idea, and then it becomes, the growth of it becomes just sort of massive. And how did you kind of manifest that growth in terms of what you did and perhaps how other people got involved?
Well, it would be great to say everything was planned, and but no, not really. And one of the things I love about the name World of Wonder is that it never ceases to amaze us how things kind of turn out. So Randy and I were at film school, and NYU, they were very film centered. They didn't really have much time for TV.
Right.
But this was the time MTV was launching and cable. And there was also this thing called public access. which basically meant that anybody who wanted to in America, if they made a TV show, they could just take it down to their cable company and they would have to air it. No one had to pay for it other than the person themselves making their show. So I guess it was like a version of the soapbox or, Speaker's Corner. And then the shows in New York made on public access were just unlike anything else. They were very punk, very anarchic, and very inspiring. And that's really what drew us to TV and to set up World of Wonder, because the very first show we ever did was for Channel 4 UK over here, and it was called Manhattan Cable. And it was essentially a collection of clips from these weird and wacky public access shows. I guess you could say it was like YouTube viral videos before YouTube or viral videos.
Right, yeah.
I was thinking of almost like You Being Framed, of like, the compilation thing. So is that how it sort of presented itself?
Yes, it was absolutely content aggregation. And of course, out of that, when having made Manhattan Cable, Channel 4 said, well, why don't you try and do the same thing in the UK? And of course, there is no public access in the UK. The whole idea that anyone should be allowed on TV was some sort of heretical, bomb-throwing concept. But we did it. We did a show called Takeover TV, out of which we discovered Adam and Joe. So, here one thing leads to the next. We also, by the way, someone who sent in a tape was this guy called, he was standing in an elevator in a council flat, sampling the urine samples on the ground, like just like a Chardonnay. And that person was Graham Norton.
No way.
So, Edgar Wright, the director of Ant-Man and Shaun of the Dead, of course, and creator of many other things, also sent in his homemade horror movies.
Wow.
So it was a real, well, I guess I tell this long rambling story because one thing leads to the next in a way that you can't always strategize.
Do you feel that beginning in public access, which as an American I totally get, but is very foreign, I think, to the British audiences, do you think that those roots in public access are what kind of led you towards reality television in the end? Do you see that connection?
No question. Not only reality television, but actually everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying that we were seers or prophets of any kind, but I think when you look at the era we live in, the screen age in which we're all creators, that was the way things were headed. Who could have known it? But that's absolutely been our sort of bedrock inspiration and continues to be so, because I guess, the arts, and television generally doesn't get considered to be part of the arts,
right?
Is not an elite world, but it has its sort of high aspirations. And as a result, there can be this kind of sort of snobbery. And I think as a teenager in the punk era, one of the appealing things, I didn't like punk music. I thought it was noisy. Which is rich coming from someone who can't sing or play an instrument. But anyway, one of the things that just appealed about it was that anyone can do it. And to me, that is one of the most, anyone can do anything is one of the most exciting things. And I know that can be like, that has been dogmatized as the American dream and be what you want. And I don't think it's quite the same thing because results are not guaranteed, or results may vary, like they say on the packet. Results may vary. But that fundamental idea of anyone should do whatever they want is very inspirational to us.
In that sort of landscape, because it does remind me a lot of this sort of YouTube era where, especially with everyone having phones in their pockets that can shoot really high quality video, it means it's democratized. The tools are democratized, so anyone can do it. But how do you stand out in that world? And it sort of seems quite familiar to almost the YouTube world, this sort of public access world. Do you just stick to your principles, or are you actively trying to stand out above everyone else sending in the content?
Oh my goodness! I mean, that's absolutely the challenge, I think, facing anyone today. It's not making it in terms of producing something or creating something. That's not the challenge. It's how do you get it noticed? What is it like? What is it like? 24 hours of content are uploaded to YouTube every minute of every day.
Oh, God.
How are you going to cut through? And honestly, I have no idea.
Is it strong ideas, do you think? Like, are they the main thing, or is it always like people-led? I'm sure the answer is all of the above, depending on the project, I suppose. But
yes.
From your experience, what was your USP that you felt you were trying to access at that time? Or at that point, were you just thinking, we're just going to be as creative as possible?
Well, there's like two answers to that question. I think one is genuinely, truly, rule number one is there are no rules. And rule number two is read the above. I really think, because our path is not, we could post-rationalize it and say, well, this is how you do it. But it wouldn't work and it wouldn't be true. And so that is why there's really no substitute for doing what you want to do. And I would just sort of draw a side note there and say, well, I disagree with the sort of rock idea that it's all about being your authentic self. Because I think that, actually someone said this to me the other day. They said, well, it's not about being your authentic self. It's like your essential self. Because here we are in an age in the ScreenAge, in which it's not just one identity that we're managing or promoting, it's multiple identities. Every different platform that we use or outlet, there's a different idea at work. The me on Twitter is not the me on Facebook, is not the me on Instagram. And similarly, the drag me may be completely, will be completely different. And of course, it's all drag. So the idea is, I think, just this idea of your essential self, which may manifest in multiple different ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think authenticity is a terribly overused word. And you know what, also, it's a little bit puritanical. It's this idea that there is one true self and that anything else is false. And I just think that that's a very puritanical refusal to embrace the complexity, the terrifying complexity of the ScreenAge.
Yeah.
It's just you can't turn the clock back, and it probably never was like that anyway, even in the old 1600s. And that Puritan message that you should appear to be as you are, has caused so much suffering and pain. And it's not who we are in our human nature. We're sort of naturally, everybody's in drag. I'm in drag now. You're in drag. And you've got that weird sock over the microphone. But these are all statements of sorts, or maybe fantasies, who knows what. But, we're all sending signals all the time.
It's an icebreaker.
Oh, yeah, great. Yes, exactly.
Well, and you're so right, even before the ScreenAge, right? Walt Whitman wrote, "We contain multitudes." There are so many versions of ourselves. And that is really, I think, one of the most, interesting things about reality television in general, right, is this sort of showing people, quote unquote, people as they are. But obviously it's a performance as well.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering how, you really kind of got your start in reality TV, and now World of Wonder has really expanded. And we will come to talk about your book, obviously. But I'm just thinking, I loved The Eyes of Tammy Faye. So you guys have moved into documentary and now film. And so how did you manage that transition between things that to outsiders and probably to our young listeners seem very, very different?
Well, yes, I guess they do seem different, but really they're one and the same thing, in that what excited us about public access was this sort of documentary type feeling to it, because people were revealing themselves or performing of themselves in ways that was really fascinating. And not fascinating in an anthropological sense, like really exciting to us. We didn't go to a drag show and say, this would be, it was like, we just loved it.
Right.
The anarchic, nonsensical, taking the piss out of everything while also loving it. It was just a sort of, well, actually, I've struggled for a long time to describe it, but I think whoever came up with the term queer joy, that's what it is. And so there was a question there, though, about how do we, yes. So really, someone like Tammy Faye, who was so extraordinary, I think perhaps a lot of people said, well, you're going to get to the bottom of who Tammy Faye is and reveal her. And it's like, actually, no.
Mm-hmm.
What you saw with Tammy Faye was what you got. The performance was the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what an amazing, inspiring reality it was to be around, because it was very welcoming. It was very atypical of the entire televangelical movement, which was normally seemed preoccupied with demonizing others and, especially gays, and saying they're all going to burn in hell. But
Right.
Tammy Faye was like, come on in, let's have a house party. So she was a radical media star. And I think people, Ru is a drag queen and a musician, of course, but fundamentally Ru speaks television fluently. And I think Tammy Faye fundamentally spoke television fluently. And people who inspire us, Liberace was, yes, brilliant musician, fundamentally, well, actually a drag queen, but fundamentally spoke television fluently. And that this era of spectacle, of where it's sort of all the arts combine into this kind of spectacle, is something that just, it's all one thing. It's essentially, it's just storytelling. So really, there's not really much difference. There's no difference between reality TV and documentaries. It's all storytelling. And you know what? Where the difference is, and stop me if I'm just going on and on, where the real difference and boundary seems to be, and a boundary that we find challenging still today, is between unscripted and scripted. It's like you're entering some other world, and whatever juice we might have in the unscripted world almost counts against us in the scripted world. And it was very interesting to see when Jessica Chastain came along and said, I want to turn your documentary into a movie, because that's what she said.
Right.
We were like, you don't need our documentary. I mean, go tell Tammy's story. You don't need us. And she was like, no, this is what I want to do. And God bless her, because, it really gave the documentary and Tammy and her work a legitimacy that she never had in her own life. And I feel that those Oscars that Jessica deservedly won, they're also Tammy's. And it's significant that one of them was for hair and makeup, precisely because of Tammy's
That's
radical...
what she was. She was hair and makeup, right?
That was Tammy who created that. So it's a funny way in which recognition and kudos seems to belong to the world of scripted and versus world unscripted, which is galling or irritating, but also actually I think important, because that way that allows unscripted to have far more influence and impact, even though it's not given the credit. So, yeah.
I was wondering, obviously you mentioned meeting Ru for the first time. How early on into that introduction were the seeds of RuPaul's Drag Race planted? Like, how early on was the talk about this could be a TV show? And what was the sort of early conception of it? What did it look like in comparison to what it became, would you say?
Meeting Ru, one of the things about it is, you talk about finding your tribe. And I think sometimes in life, when you meet people that are your tribe, it's almost like you don't even need to speak. You just, it's just that connection is made. And that was definitely the case with Ru. In terms of, we talked about what about a nationwide drag search around the time of Supermodel. But we also recognized that, drag queens weren't on TV. I mean, they would be in sort of crime procedurals where drag queen number one would turn up dead or something.
Yes.
But it just wasn't. And I think to some extent we bought that prejudice that it just wasn't possible. But how nonsensical was that? Because when you think about the small screen, it's all about big impact, It's different to the movies. And the small screen Big impact. I mean, what is drag? And so the two really go together like peanut butter and jelly. But it did take a few years,
Yeah.
like what, 15, 16 years from those first seeds to it become. And in fact, we'd even pitched something like it a few times. And Tom Campbell, who joined us, we'd sort of given up. And Tom Campbell joined us and said, you really should take this out and really double down on this. And we were like, okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Genius was going into the room at the right time, and Logo came on board.
Yeah. I wonder, just in terms of like bigger picture of reality TV stuff, what does truth mean to you in reality TV? Because I know like every now and then there's always like every couple of years there'll be some instance on TV where someone will come out and say that was edited differently to how it actually was. But sometimes actually the edited down version is possibly a more truthful reflection of what actually happened in a condensed period of time, because there's so many layers and you have to find the essence of what happened.
Yeah.
But I wonder what it means to you and how much truth has an importance to your work, or what maybe the things are that drive you in reality TV and the reality aspect of it.
Well, part of the ongoing prejudice against reality TV is that it's not real and that it's not true, which I think harkens back to this fundamental Puritan prejudice that that's what it should be about, the truth, the one truth. But as hopefully we're all coming to realize, is that there isn't really one truth. There's multiple truths, which is not a cynical statement at all, but a way of accommodating and understanding that everybody here on this planet is different and has different ideas and believes different things. So really a battle for the truth will only lead to tragedy, horror, and bloodshed, as it has done for thousands of years. So I'm not a big, I think this using of the truth to weaponize it against reality TV is way overplayed. And you're absolutely right. It comes up time and again, usually in print media. But here's the thing, any story is a construction. Life doesn't have beginning, middle, and end. That the act of making a story is almost to bend the truth or compress the truth into some format that is comprehensible and shareable and memorable. These are all, and we don't go around saying, well, stories are untrue, and I think actually, as a collection of untruths, you'd be hard pressed to find a book that contains more of them than the Bible, but it's packed with fabulous stories. So again, and the other thing is, of course, that a camera, invites a performance. I don't sit around in my hotel room talking to myself like this, because you're here, the camera, we're doing this. And you see, I think there's this really deep-rooted prejudice against performance. I mean, let's remember that the Puritans in the 1600s wanted to close the theaters.
They shut them all down, yep.
What tramps did, they probably weren't wrong, but the idea of a moral judgment against it. And yet, what is the point of, we're here to perform. And I think it gets caught up in this weird sort of fake argument. Is it true or not? And of course, any story is edited, and it also ends up being a collaboration between the people on the camera and the people behind the camera. And Ru's got a great song, "Blame It on the Edit," which is something we do hear about from time to time in Drag Race. But you're the one that said it. Blame it on the edit.
Yeah. Do you feel like, so much of what you have done over the course of your career is try to give, people who aren't generally seen on television a chance to be on television. But interestingly, it's through a lens of performance, while drag is, I feel at least personally kind of connecting to some sort of inner truth of that performer, it is still a very performative act. And I'm just wondering, in terms of your own kind of journey as a maker, how much that, being a quote unquote outlier in society impacted what you decided to do, in terms of the art that you make, because I'm sure you consider what you do art, even though, as you say, many people have a kind of prejudice that reality TV isn't art.
Yeah, I think that we never felt, Randy and I never felt that we only wanted to make shows for our community.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more the feeling that seeing the amazing artists on that tiny stage in the pyramid, maybe there were 75 or 100 people there in that club crammed in, just the feeling that this was great art that everybody could enjoy and relate to. And that rather than feeling marginal, the stories these artists had to tell about their lives and who they were are relevant to everybody. And it's always like, it's a thing. You always like, people are like, oh wow, Drag Race is doing so well. It's like, it was such a niche show, and they're like, not shocked. Well, it's a surprise.
Were you surprised?
Yeah.
I was going to say, were you surprised?
Yeah.
Well, no, because I think here's what's happened, and this has been a long time coming, a sort of cultural movement. But I do think queerness has almost become a metaphor for the human condition. So that you're gay or straight. I think Randy and I were keenly aware in the 80s, living in New York, with AIDS, that we were outsiders. And I think many gay people grow up with that experience of feeling like outsiders. But here's the thing. Everybody, even straight people, I am sure, I don't know, but even feel at some point in their lives like outsiders. And that really the voice of the outsider, far from being the voice of the marginal, it's the voice of the mainstream. So that's what motivated us. It was a realization that everybody's story counts, and that the worst thing, not the worst thing, but just being queer, you could sort of misconstrue it, understandably, because that's the way society kind of puts you in a box, as being marginal, of less significance. It's almost like, internalizing being someone who doesn't really count. But that's just not the case. It's not true.
It's
Absolutely.
almost,
And in fact, I think, this idea of queerness as a metaphor is a really important idea.
yeah.
Did you meet any, when you were first wanting to make a show like Drag Race, did you meet with any kind of, I would say, unfortunately, typical mainstream kind of BS about, we don't want to put, quote unquote, these people on TV? Did you, how much of that, of making something about what people perceive as outsiders, impacted your ability to kind of make it?
Yeah. Well, it was no's across the board. It was no's everywhere. But we do have this big painting in our office made by a friend of ours from those days. And it's a paint by numbers painting of the Arc de Triomphe or something. And it's got it cut out, almost like where people haven't painted in the colors yet. It says yes. And the reason we have that is because Randy says no is the beginning of yes. So, and that's fine, because you only need one person to say yes, and then you get to do it. So it's not, that's it. And so there's tons of no's, like lots of different ways of saying no. Very few people wanted to nail their colors to the mast and say, no drag queens on my channel. But there are all sorts of different excuses or ways of framing it. But essentially it's no.
Right.
And so you just have to keep going until one person says yes.
Were there any sort of moments where the people that said no then came back later and were like, "Oh, I don't know, we've changed our mind," or were you just not entertaining those sort of conversations? I suppose.
Oh, well, people are smart, so normally they say something like, "Oh, we always believed in that show. We always knew." It was amazing." Yeah. Very quickly rewriting history.
Yeah.
You mentioned your offices. I wonder, what does a day look like for you, being involved in so many sort of different productions and films as well? Like, do you feel spread across a lot of things and therefore not as active in all of them, or do you take key active roles in certain aspects of different productions?
Randy and I, yes, people have asked us how Randy and I divide up things. And unfortunately, it's kind of organic and sort of hard to say. We met at film school and then we were boyfriends for like 20 years, as well as partners. So I guess out of that has come a sort of intuition about what the other's thinking and what the other might want to do. And that's great to have that second pair of eyes or ears. And it's not particularly organized. I suppose, I suppose Randy's more hands-on with productions and in the US, and I end up traveling more, I suppose, but we each do different things, and then we'll also be directing together. We're doing a documentary series at the moment, a couple of them actually for HBO. But here's the thing. I think it is good to do lots of different things because there's only so many hours in the day you can spend on one thing. And there's a certain pace at which things move. So you're going to have a lot of downtime otherwise. So, and I don't know, each thing sort of helps keep the others. But yeah, it's like reading lots of different books at once. It's just more interesting sometimes than reading one book, I suppose.
Is that what it's evolved into, or did you have multiple projects from the go that you were trying to get off the ground, or do you think it's better to focus on one thing at the start of your career and then?
I wish Randy was here because we would both give completely different answers. Randy's very laser focused on one thing, and when we're making a film, actually, Randy will be laser focused on the first 5 minutes. And I'm like, never mind that. Why don't you figure out the entire thing? And then the first 5 minutes will reveal itself to you. And we just fight about it endlessly. So, we've always had different approaches, I suppose, to how we go about it.
Which probably makes you a good team. You balance one another out, right?
Maybe it's like the Rolls and the Royce. Not to insult Rolls Royce.
Well, it sounds like the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? Maybe he might, he sees the trees and you see the forest, as it were.
We do have a weird yin and yang. We really do. And I guess I would agree that it's a great thing. It's a very lucky thing to be able to have, because I think it can get really stressful and dispiriting at times. Because even though you say, "Oh, you only need one person to say yes," you can be kissing a lot of frogs to find that prince. So it's nice to have someone that you can, who understands and who's going to sort of cheer you on at those inevitably really bleak moments.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me into the next question I wanted to ask, which is in this world where now you really have your fingers in a lot of pies and you are approaching a lot of different kinds of projects, but also a lot of different sort of media. You've got doc series, as you say, that you're making. You've still got Drag Race. You've got you now are on this EP. You've got this EP credit on a fiction film. On the Jessica Chastain Eyes of Tammy Faye. In terms of what you do nowadays with all of these different things, what kind of skills do you think you need? What are the skills that you have, or that you wish you had more of, that make you successful, being able to kind of spin all these plates simultaneously?
I don't know, but we recently uh, we actually recently EP'd a film, Fry Bread, Face and Me, that's coming on Netflix on the 24th of November. And it's a coming of age story, written and directed by Billy Luther, and it's set on the Navajo reservation. He's Native American, and it's about that experience growing up. It's a great film. But one of the he put that together with financing from World Wonder and a number of other fantastic partners and producers, one of whom is Taika Waititi, who, the independent film director who then went on to direct Thor Ragnarok. And
we are big fans of Taika Waititi here.
What a genius, right?
Yeah.
And he's an actor, he's a writer, he's a director, and he doesn't stop. And he's doing a new Star Wars movie. And and so I kind of worship him. And I was reading an interview with him the other day, and there were two. One is he says he appears to say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually, why not? I do think saying yes more than no is a good strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, he said, in terms of how you do things, and he was talking about his directing, that he used to be much more, and I feel I shouldn't be like telling his story, but it just meant a lot to me, was that in directing, it's not necessarily about controlling the situation, but it's actually about letting it happen, which is a very sort of documentary kind of approach.
Yes.
In the sense that, and he said it was more like be like water. You don't have to be so insistent that it's this way or that way, and that if you just let it all happen. And another great Hollywoodism I kind of like is ride the horse in the direction it's going. It'll probably turn out fine. Well, maybe it won't, but it'll be an interesting ride. So,
so it sounds like flexibility is a good skill to have, malleability.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because, and yes, I think, just say yes.
Yeah, that's lovely.
It's almost like that balance of like, you need to be bullish about your ideas in terms of if you believe in them, trying to get them to work, but also be open to the flexibility of taking the opportunities when they do arise. And then do you always try and put your spin on things if something comes up that maybe you didn't think you had something to say about it?
Yeah, not really, in the sense that I think what Rennie and I have always been excited about are stories or people who kind of live out loud, that they are almost their own producers, that they're not, don't allow themselves to be edited into conformity by social expectations. So, we've always just responded to that. So I think what we always want to do in telling a story is, well, let the story tell you how to tell it. And as a result, every story is different, hopefully, like with the Mapplethorpe film we did a few years ago. I mean, Mapplethorpe was very different, was not that kind of a person. But Mapplethorpe was obsessed with dualities, and so the idea in that film was always to have it like use a lot of double images, and it is funny how we couldn't think of what to call it, and there are all these films and stories about Mapplethorpe, and they're like the perfect moment or this or that. None of them felt right, and so we were really stuck for the title. And the actual title of the film is Mapplethorpe, Just Look at the Pictures. And that came completely by accident, in that the beginning of the film is Jesse Helms, dead, fortunately, radical, loony, right, what kind of person.
Yeah.
And he's on the floor of the Senate shouting, look at these pictures, look at these pictures. And he's got this big picture that he's flashing, saying, look at the pictures, look at the pictures. And it was like, oh, there it is. That's the title. And so as a result, another limitation that was imposed on us by the Mapplethorpe Foundation was that we shouldn't be zooming in or showing details of the pictures. just the pictures. And at first we were like, going to be a bit dull. We're just going to look at a picture. But then it was like, yeah, actually, that's going to work.
Yeah.
Because this man thrashing around trying to make fire out of this thing, being sort of coy on the one hand, yet trying to shove them in your face on the other, versus looking at these beautifully composed, perfectly conceived pictures, just looking at it, which again was contrary to the rhythms of a lot of documentary and reality, where you go cut to make it exciting. See, so it's all about letting the story tell you how to tell it, I think. Because God knows how to do it otherwise.
I had a sort of a double question. Firstly, it's what was it like winning an Emmy? And was there a point at which you felt like an insider of the industry rather than being an outsider trying to make it? Was there a moment that you felt that switched, or did that never switch?
In my honestly, I mean, it's lovely to have won an Emmy. It really is. It's great. But this is a question that comes up of, how does it feel to go from outsider to sort of institutional? And honestly, you just don't feel that. I think maybe that's because the entire industry is a mountain, a mess of insecurity. No one feels secure. Yeah. And I suspect that anyone who feels they have made it, maybe Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk feels like, but I wonder actually, maybe they're tormented with insecurities. One would hope so.
I hope so.
Might mitigate some of
the billions of dollars they have. Yeah.
I heard people talking about that once, actually, recently, saying that if you took away all their money, or even actually, if you gave them all the money they have now at the age of sort of 15, 16, they would still probably do what they do, because it's probably the torture within inside themselves that's driving them to go from one thing to another. I don't know if we can take solace in that. The shared pain of human experience.
Well, I think maybe, yes, I think that maybe is consoling.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you about your book and sort of how you decided to write a book and why this book, ScreenAge, How TV Shaped Our Reality, from Tammy Faye to RuPaul's Drag Race. So can you tell us a little bit about your decision to write a book and why this book?
I believe that television really has shaped our reality and fundamentally transformed us. Mm-hmm. And the title ScreenAge is not in any way, facetious. Like, I think we've been in an Iron Age and, the Bronze Age, and I think now we're in the ScreenAge. And I think in an early version, not of the book, but it was called the Information Age. But it's actually not the Information Age, because we've all seen that the ScreenAge isn't necessarily about knowing more. It's the ScreenAge is not a version of a book. It's actually its own thing, and it's a lot of emotions and different points of view, and really challenging in so many respects, especially for our culture, which I think is a print-based culture. And so it's very hard to. It's taken a lot of us, myself included, by surprise. How could someone like Trump, for example, who is such a barefaced liar and who has no real use for the truth, and no use for the truth in terms of any kind of moral sense or in any kind of social. I mean, just how could he possibly have become president? Mm-hmm. And going to try and do it again? So it is the ScreenAge, and I think that because of this prejudice against television and this print-based prejudice, we have failed as a society to not just accept or understand the world we're living in. And I think that's so I think it's for me, it was important to write the book because I went to Oxford. I read English. TV wasn't something that was is not what you were expected to do.
Right.
And to some extent, I felt guilty. In fact, last night I was invited back to Lincoln, my college at Oxford, to speak about it. And they were like, well, and I was like, I wrote the book because I felt I should do something with this otherwise useless English degree. Make some accounting of myself. And I had to sit at the high table with my tutor, who I reminded him, actually he didn't need reminding, he remembered perfectly well, that, I was never reading, and he was like, always kind of cross with me. But so I kind of did it for that because, yeah.
So it was a revenge on your.
No, revenge. No, I was trying to make good and make amends. I think really.
Would you? I was wondering. So I actually have a literature degree as well, which is something I did because I'd already been making films for so many years, and I know there's so many good film courses out there, but a lot of them do teach you things from scratch. And that felt like, I'm sure the third year would have been really good, but the first 2 years I'd be paying a lot for things that I'd already taught myself.
Right.
Do you think that literature is a good way to go for storytellers? Obviously, yeah. Is that what you would recommend to sort of our young audience, do you think? Or
I do. I mean, this is the very fogey part, isn't it? In the sense that I really do think reading is fundamental. And really a great way to, yes, it's all about storytelling. Even those sort of Victorian novels in the golden age of the novel. I mean, what fantastic stories, or Shakespeare. What amazing. I mean, really great stories. And let's. I mean, you don't have to read it to become more smart. Just why not read it to rip off some good ideas?
Absolutely.
Because everything's matched up.
All the best artists steal.
Well, exactly. Yes, exactly. So instead of having to struggle to come up with a whole new story from scratch, you're not going to succeed at that anyway, because you're essentially going to be mixing and matching. And I do think everything is a mashup, and that's one of the things that pop culture, by that I mean pop art, really broke through and established.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say so. Yeah.
I want to ask you to
and
do.
Plus, hopefully, they would read my book, because the number of friends in LA who are like, why are you writing a book? I don't read books. And I was like, well, don't worry, I'll record the audio version for you, which I did, and is also available if anybody wants. But I just. I think it's kind of a shame that people don't read more.
Yeah. And in terms of, your book is a little bit kind of retrospective, how TV shaped our reality, looking from the past to now. I want to ask you to kind of now do the next step of that, which is to prognosticate a little bit. Tell us the future, Fenton. What do you think, or what do you see as the developments of where's reality TV going? Where's unscripted TV heading? Because Dan and I actually talk a lot about this, that to a certain extent, some people believe and have said we currently live in a golden age of television. But when they talk about that, they mostly mean scripted television.
Oh, always, without fail.
Right.
It's almost like, Sunset Boulevard, I am still big. It's the pictures that got small. Yes.
Right.
Premium drama on Netflix is now where the movies are at.
Right.
So it's just that same old snobbery, because people are like, well, it's not really TV.
Right. But I would say that even though there is that snobbery, that we do also kind of live in a golden age of reality television as well. That there's there's so much reality television programming. There's so much documentary television programming, which I love and I think is so fantastic. And as you say, is actually quite a parallel to reality TV. Where do you see it going in the future? Do you have any notion of kind of what, if there is another development, or if we keep going, or how does it play out to you in the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, you're right. The book is a history, and because it doesn't really take into account social media or TikTok. And to be honest, it's because I still think we're in it,
Mm-hmm.
and I personally myself don't completely get it.
Yeah.
So it definitely is a historical book, weird as it may be to say. But and this is a question because people do say, "Well, what's next?" And I don't know, but I've noticed some things, almost like three things lately. Over this past summer, that I think might be part of the answer. In that, when the Barbie movie came out, what was that? That was not just another movie being released.
Mm-hmm.
No.
This was a movie about a doll that had fallen out of fashion a long time ago. Like 6 or 7 years ago, there was a great documentary called Tiny Shoulders
Yes.
about Barbie.
Yes.
And how the whole brand was in deep trouble and
Yes.
had just ceased to be relevant. So that was weird because here's this movie about this this sort of nice but passé thing. And that, to me, as brilliant as the movie was, what was even more amazing was the way the audiences came to the movie, all dressed up. I mean, they were in drag. Everyone was in pink. And I love that because it also sent the message that you're not gay if you wear pink. You're not a queer. You can dress up and have fun with it and embrace it. To me, it was totally a drag explosion.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more than that. I think it was also the audience showing that they weren't there to just watch a movie. They were there to be a part of a movie. And that's what I think the future is about. This kind of sort of super engagement.
Mm.
People want to feel that they belong and that they're a part of something.
Yeah.
And I think that actually is how and why, I think that's why Drag Race is still on the air 15 years later and still growing. I think that's why the Barbie movie worked. And the next thing that happened that summer was the Taylor Swift tour. I mean, Taylor Swift, she's very young, but she's still been around for a long time.
Yes.
In normal pop arcs, might have peaked. So what's going on there? Again, it's like, well, pop culture is not something that people just do in their youth and grow out of. It's something you live with and grow up to, and all the way through. And then she paid for the movie version of this show.
Right.
And it comes out and does over $100 million. So all the time the people in Hollywood are like, what is the story? How are the characters? All this sort of scripted high church poncing around about what makes a movie, your Oppenheimer sort of thing. You got that. And then she makes this concert film with her own money, releases it, and it breaks all the box office. Not only that, but also the way people watch that movie. Again, they're a part of the movie. They all went dressed up.
Mm-hmm.
They all stood in their seats and sang along. And this is the other thing. Remember the great moral panic of the 90s or 2000s? Piracy is killing the movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It wasn't true. Taylor Swift was like, let them take pictures. Let them make movie clips in the theater of the movie.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
heresy.
Right.
But the very thing that actually, to me, secured the future of the movies, which were sort of on, in critical condition. And then I'll shut up. The third thing was the Sphere opened in Las Vegas. One of the world's most expensive buildings, if not the most expensive building, I think $2.2 billion. And what is it? It's the planet's biggest TV screen.
Mm.
So to me, all those things point to the fact that A, the ScreenAge is not going anywhere, but B, what it's all about isn't just watching something, it's feeling like a part of it, that you belong to it. So that the whole thing, it's a sort of it's a 360 experience. And I think that's but to me, that's really exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was very
a
lucky.
cultural experience, I think, is what people are really looking for now. And maybe, I mean, I don't know if that would have always happened, but I tend to feel like part of that is coming out of the pandemic where we were all locked inside and didn't get to have any of those cultural experiences. And so we did watch a lot of television, right? All we could do was watch television and films. And then we got out of our houses, and now we're trying to sort of recreate this kind of magic that we experienced in a very dark time, this sort of like, I'm getting to just enjoy what I love, but also I want to do that outside of my home with other people and have that connection and that sense of belonging. So it is really an interesting kind of, it'll be very interesting to see how it develops and
yes. No, I mean,
continues.
and there's no question it's complicated and there'll be problems and all the rest of it. But I do not believe it is a doomsday type time. And I know there's a lot of books are always wringing their hands about television and popular culture and what a terrible thing it is. But it just isn't. It's the lifeblood of our culture. And interestingly, I think the awful thing about COVID aside was that actually it accelerated us into the screen age. I still I was worried you were going to ask me earlier about what is a day in the office like. Well, I kind of don't go into the office that much because that's what, the work from home thing and Zooms and Google Meet. I mean, it works and it works really well. It's not a substitute for anything, but to me, it's all about the screen, but not just the screen. It's the screen plus and people feeling that they belong to something and have a stake in something, and can be a part of something.
Yeah, amazing. So we are almost out of time, Fenton. This has been so lovely, but we do have our big two questions that we always ask.
Okay.
I think you've been warned about them.
Yes, I'm right. I have. But I've forgotten what they were.
It's okay. So the first question is, what were you doing during your teenage years that maybe you didn't realize at the time, but turn out to be really maybe essential for what you do now? And then what advice would you give to that teenage self?
You're trying to make me cry, aren't you? You're doing what would you say to your teenage self? I'll tell you, this doesn't really answer your question, but I have to tell you because it gobsmacked me.
Please.
So I was at Oxford last night signing books, and I said, someone came up and said, and then they said, when I was at Oxford, one of the, I don't know if Saltburn's coming out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's that Bridesheady sort of obsessive love, people just go loony, in a sort of Ivy,
Yeah.
that sort of, the trope.
Yeah.
So when I was at Oxford, I had one of those sort of love affairs myself, and it was sort of it was just very sort of wrenching, and anyway.
Yeah.
So this person's standing before me, and I signed the book for her, and she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm so and so's daughter," and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was looking at the daughter of my former boyfriend at university. That was a trip. So
Wow.
what would I say to my 19-year-old self then? I don't know.
Stop dating straight men.
But I tell you, number one, it made me feel really old. That was like the fact that he has a kid who's it's like, anyway. But to specifically answer the question, I think that, funnily enough, the thing I remember most as a kid was watching TV and loving it. And the one show, and I write about this in the book, that really I connected to was the TV version of Batman. Adam West.
Adam West, yeah.
Obviously, I didn't know I was gay, but there was something about it that it was camp, it was colorful, it was silly, it was sort of, it was all sorts of things I couldn't completely take in, but I was absolutely compelled by it. So, and funny enough, my parents banned me from watching it because they thought it was terrible rubbish that shouldn't be allowed, and made me overexcited, and But in a way, my course was set that early on, and I think maybe anyone will be able to recognize that at some point in life there's something that they glom onto, that even if they don't understand, if they glom onto it, they should honor that and go with that. And because that's essentially who they are, and that's how they will find their tribe. So that's what I would probably say to, I would say right on. That's what I would say. But I'd also say, hopefully there would be, that I would skip all the anxiety and misery and self-doubt and depression, and, it's good. It'd be nice to leave that phase out. Maybe you can't, maybe that's to go through to figure it out.
Yeah,
there wasn't, I mean, this is no exaggeration. One of the last things I wrote in the book was early on in the beginning, and it was talking about realizing I was gay. And I say it took me a lifetime to realize. I mean, I'm not self-hating. I've always been gay. I'm always more or less out, but always had this sort of sense that there's something wrong. Something wrong with me, or wrong with it, or with being gay. And it wasn't until I wrote it down at the end of the book, which was in the beginning, that there was nothing wrong with me at all. No, and really to believe that there was nothing wrong with me at all. And all this time, I thought there's something wrong, and there's something wrong with me. And that's the bit I think that's what I would say. Nothing wrong with you. It's everybody else's problem. It's not yours.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Fenton. This has been really, really wonderful.
Thank you. What great questions. And I think the sock really helped.
Honestly, it's what makes the podcast for me every time, is just looking at that thing in the screen. It's hilarious.
Change the name of it, post pictures of it.
The funny thing is, I think I do have a pop filter somewhere, like in a box, but it's because I
use it.
It's because I do so much traveling round, and I sort of taught myself how to do some music stuff, and it's just so much easier just to put the sock microphone into a bag than it is to put a pop filter.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's a hack. It's hot. It's provocative.
Well, thank you again, and we're just so honored to have you on the podcast. So this will make a lot of our listeners very excited. We know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Please do encourage your listeners to sign up to Wow Presents Plus, because there's so much great original content that we make there.
Yes, absolutely.
In addition to every version of Drag Race you could wish for.
Yes, every country, right? Every single country is on there.
Wow. How many countries are there now that have a Drag Race?
17.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh my God. I mean, I know we're going over. Are there countries that are like, obviously I know it's harder in certain countries just due to where they're at politically or socially. Do you still try and push and fight to get it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's the whole point, because it's those countries, especially where you believe the show could be so helpful.
Yeah.
And even in, traditionally Catholic countries like Spain and Italy, it's done so well.
Yeah.
And I think the French, I was just in Paris and saw the live show with the cast, which was amazing. The French were so shocked at how well the show does.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
They had no idea on TV France that it would just be this smash hit.
That people want to watch it, right.
Yeah. And so it absolutely gets me out of bed every day. It's like, got to get Drag Race Russia.
That would be the biggest coup of all time, Drag Race Russia, I reckon.
Right?
I feel like I'd watch that one as well.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be so good.
I believe it will happen. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't know if, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I do believe it will happen. And it's inevitable, I think. That's the thing. All these sort of forces, and I know we're over time, but all these forces trying to turn back the clock, and it won't work.
We only move
Never
forward,
has, it never will.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Well, thank you so
Brilliant.
much, Fenton. Honestly.
Thank you.
Yes,
Feel better.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Take care.
I was reminded when we were talking about being like an insider and an outsider. I'd read this interview once with an Oscar-winning writer. He'd literally just won the Oscar for Best Screenplay.
Yeah.
And he said that getting his next film off the ground was a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
And he went to all the studios and they just weren't interested in the script. And the point of the article really was saying that he figured once he'd won an Oscar, that's it. You'd get the secret keys to the kingdom.
Right.
But the reality is that's just not the case. Now, obviously, you can build up credibility and more people will want to work with you and stuff. And my understanding is that the writer has obviously written lots and lots of other things and they've all gotten made. But he thought that would have been his just ticket and now suddenly he's an insider. But I think the reality is I think maybe we're always outsiders. And we build these connections, but we always still feel like outsiders, which I think is pertinent to the success of Fenton's work, and I think also illustrates why it's important as well, especially as we were talking about the getting Drag Race into other countries at the end. So I'm so glad we sort of took the time to ask about that. It was honestly amazing.
Well, it just makes me think that isn't the point of or maybe not the point, but isn't one of the points of storytelling, at least from my perspective, is to show someone something and say, haven't you felt this way too? Right? Is to say you're not an outsider. You aren't alone. What you are feeling is in some way universal to what other people are feeling. I think and that's, I think, sort of what, not that I want to put words in his mouth, but that's sort of what Fenton was saying, right? That it's all performative. Everybody's always in drag. We're always telling our own version of our own story. And we're always kind of shouting our yop to the universe to say, doesn't anybody feel the same way I feel? And the beautiful thing about stories is yes, other people do. And, for all the terrible things the internet has done, one of the things that the internet has done for us is allowed us to find other people whose stories resonate with us or who resonate with our own stories. And I think that's the power of something like reality television, and certainly obviously something like Drag Race, which is, as you say, talking about how it's spread internationally, so important in bringing these quote, I don't really believe they're outlier stories, but they are positioned as outlier stories into the mainstream to say, actually, we're all in the mainstream. There's no such thing as outsiders because we're all outsiders, which means we're also all insiders,
Yeah, the terminology, I can't remember if it's the screenwriting book Save the Cat or it might be this other book, but it gets you to think about how is your character an orphan, either literally or metaphorically.
Sure.
And then the moment you sort of read that, you suddenly, my brain always flashes back to all the young adult books that I've sort of ever read, where the character is always literally an orphan. If their parents are alive in chapter 1, they were not going to be in chapter 2,
Right.
Whereas more so, I think in less in young adult books and more in adult books, as it were, then it becomes maybe more metaphorical sometimes, if that's not going to be the catch for the character. And I think that
I
that
sometimes
is
feel like an orphan
does.
in this country, not being from this country. There's that you can everybody has felt like an outsider before, and that is an important kind of thing to connect to storytelling for sure.
Yeah, it's the universal in the specific, right? Which is, you can't write something that's intended to be universal. It often never actually connects. So actually, if you're very specific about the story you're telling and the person you're telling the story about, people are far more likely to find a universal truth in that they connect with. than if you just try to be write story or share stories about an every man or an every woman. You know,
this actually goes really. That you almost sort of answered the question before I even asked it. We've got a question here from Mackenzie. She writes into us asking, you know, I want to make my first documentary, but I don't know where to start. I'm interested in documentary film, and I think the answer that you just gave is pretty great, right? Find someone and tell their story, because that's their personal story will become universal to your watchers.
100%. Yeah, no, I agree. You know, I think finding the thing that makes that person different and really unique, and I'm sure you could do that with most subjects, but I think if you hone in on what it is that makes this person almost isolated in a way, then I think that's where there's almost it's going to be the most fruitful in connecting to audiences and stuff. So it's a great question.
Yeah. I also think sorry, I was just going to say, I also think Fenton kind of answered this question as well when we spoke to him, which is, you know, he said that brilliant thing about letting the story reveal itself to you. So it's almost about, you know, if you haven't got a person about whom you want to make a documentary, you might think of a subject, could be your city, your hometown, your school, something. And then in talking to people, the story could reveal itself to you, probably will reveal itself to you in some way that you weren't expecting and couldn't have maybe decided before you went into it.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I think that's literally all I was going to add as well, was that if that unique element isn't abundantly clear from the off, it doesn't mean it isn't there. And if anything, that it might mean that there's a really, really fruitful story just underneath the surface. But I think having that sense of what it is that you're looking for, it might present itself in a different way than you thought. But there's stories everywhere, you know.
Yeah, so. and what that reminds me of is something I was going to say when we were chatting and the conversation moved on, but it does remind me when we were talking about, you know, what skills you need and the kind of approach you need to take. There's a phrase I love, which is hang on tightly, let go lightly. So it's sort of coming in with something that perhaps that you're passionate about, and so you've got this thing that you're holding on to tightly, but it's also recognizing that if that doesn't remain the thing, then you let go of it lightly and you be like water and let it take you where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. So do send in your questions, guys. podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk, and we would love to answer them on a relevant episode. But this has been a real corker. Thank you. I know it's been a longer episode, so we hope you've enjoyed the extra time and bonus questions that we've had the pleasure of asking. So.
And don't forget, you can get Fenton's book, ScreenAge, How TV Shaped Our Reality from Tammy Faye to RuPaul's Drag Race, in any bookstore near you.